Hey everyone, welcome back to another logo animation tutorial. In today's video, I'll be showing you some simple yet powerful logo animation tricks that are easy to learn and maintain. Stick around until the end, and by using these techniques, you'll be able to animate any logo you want in After Effects. If you're not familiar with how to prepare a logo for animation, I've linked a video in the description to help you out. Plus, I've included the project file so you can download it and follow along with the tutorial. All right, let's jump right in. First, let's open our logo file as a composition in After Effects. Then, right-click on the layer and choose Create Shapes from Vector Layer. Now, we'll start by working on the colors of the logo. Select the pen tool and trace over the shape, making sure your path overlaps the edges. Next, add the Trim Paths effect and set 2 keyframes for the End property, going from 0 to 100. Ease the keyframes for smoother animation. Then, select Stroke from the Matte options. Adjust the graph editor for smoother animation. Now copy the Trim Paths effect, as we'll be using it later for the other elements. Finally, repeat this process for each part of the logo to animate the rest of the strokes. Now let's pre-compose the color layers and change their color to purple. Now, let's move on to the next element, the yellow bottom stroke. We'll apply the same technique here. Find the Contents section of the layer, then paste the Trim Paths effect we copied earlier. Finally, select Stroke from the Matte options to apply the effect. Next, bring in another element of the logo and apply the Offset Paths effect. Set the amount to 0 to avoid creating an extra stroke on the shape. Now, place a keyframe for an ending position. Then add a starting keyframe and adjust it until the shape disappears. Ease the keyframes and fix the motion in the graph editor. Let's play it back to see how it looks. Now, apply the same trim paths and matte reveal technique to the upper part of our logo element. Paste the Trim Paths effect and adjust the timing using the graph editor. Make sure this part moves slower than the rest to create a smoother effect. Now, bring in the black stroke and apply the same technique. Nothing fancy here. When you're tracing over the stroke, make sure your path overlaps to avoid any mistakes in the animation. Next, let's bring in the flag of Catalonia element and apply the Offset Paths effect. Just like before, add 2 keyframes. For the first keyframe, make the shape disappear, and for the second, set the value to 0. Ease the keyframes, then adjust the motion in the graph editor. To create a more staggered effect, offset the layers slightly in the timeline for better flow. Now bring in the next logo element and find the path properties. Set a keyframe for its initial position, then move further down the timeline. Next, return to the start and adjust the shape. This technique is similar to what we did earlier with the matte revealing. Remember to ease the keyframes and adjust the timing in the graph editor. Repeat this process for the other logo element, and let's see how it all looks. Now, let's change the color of the ball layer for better recognition. Next, click on an empty area in your composition and select the pen tool. With this tool, start drawing a curvy stroke. This will help make the reveal smoother and more visually appealing. Once you've created your stroke, we need to adjust its appearance to ensure it fits well with the overall animation. Look for the cap settings in the stroke panel and select Round Cap. This gives your stroke a softer look. Now, let's adjust the stroke's length. Fix the start and end lengths to achieve that smooth, curvy stroke we're going for. This step is crucial as it defines how your stroke will appear on screen. After that, add the Trim Paths effect to the stroke layer. Set keyframes for both the End and Start properties. The keyframes for the Start property will help us create the line animation effect we're aiming for. To make the animation flow more naturally, ease the keyframes by selecting them and pressing F9. This gives the animation a more organic feel. Then, adjust the timing in the graph editor and layers in the timeline so that the new stroke connects seamlessly with our existing black stroke. This connection will create a continuous animation effect that enhances the overall impact of your logo reveal. Now duplicate the stroke layer and change its color. Next, offset the layers to create a trailing effect. With that done, let's move on to our next logo element. Bring in the ball layer and press S to access the scale properties. Add 2 keyframes, setting the scale from 47 to 100 to create a smooth, scale-up effect for the ball. After that, press F9 to ease the keyframes and make the animation feel more natural. Finally, adjust the timing in the graph editor for a polished finish. Next, we're going to apply the same line animation effect to the ball. Start by drawing a line that outlines the ball, then adjust its appearance as we did previously. Once you're satisfied with how it looks, add the trim paths effect to create the drawing animation for this line. After completing this step, we can pre-compose all the layers except for the ball and the line. This will help keep our project organized and make it easier to manage the animation. Press Y to select the anchor point tool and move the anchor point to align with the ball in the logo. Finally, press S to access the scale properties and add keyframes for our pre-composed layer to create an impact effect as the ball, let's say, arrives at the logo. First, create a keyframe without adjusting any values. Then, move the timeline indicator further and set the scale value to 84. Next, copy the first keyframe and paste it at the end to complete the bounce animation. Adjust the keyframes in the timeline to find the best timing for the effect. Lastly, edit the keyframes and use the graph editor to achieve a smoother animation. Now let's offset the color layers in the logo to create a more chaotic reveal. This will add an energetic feel to the animation and enhance the overall impact. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. By the way, I asked my subscribers about this video, so be sure to subscribe to have a say in what logo animation I create next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.